The majority of HIPAA violations are unintentional. Now, there's no need for statistics to validate the statement I just made. Instead, all you need to do is think about it. Do you think most organizations or the employees working for them go out of their way to expose the sensitive data of their patients? The answer to that question for the majority of cases is no. The reality is that healthcare organizations and their business associates want to do whatever they can to safeguard the protected health information, or PHI, of their clients. Of course, that doesn't mean a breach due to malicious intent by an employee hasn't happened before. In fact, in 2003, Dr. Huping Zhou snooped into the medical records of 4 high-profile celebrities. His case was one of the first ever where a HIPAA violation that occurred was malicious. So if the violations are unintentional, why does the Department of Health and Human Services, also known as the HHS, dole out fines at all? Well, it comes down to the criteria spelled out within the section of the regulation. The HIPAA breach notification rule states that an impermissible use or disclosure of PHI is a breach unless the covered entity or business associate, as applicable, demonstrates that there is a low probability of compromised PHI based on a risk assessment of at least the following factors: the nature and extent of the protected health information involved, including the types of identifiers and the likelihood of re-identification, the unauthorized person who used the protected health information or to whom made the disclosure, whether the protected health information actually acquired or viewed, and the extent of mitigation on the risk of the protected health information. This section of HIPAA also identifies 3 exceptions to a breach. Let's go over each exception and give clear examples of unintentional HIPAA violations based on them. Hi everyone, I'm Matt from eTactics, and today I'm going to define the 3 exceptions to unintentional HIPAA violations. But before we get started though, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the button below. While you're down there, hit that alert bell icon next to it as well, so when we post new helpful content, you get notified. The first HIPAA violation exception is called an unintentional acquisition. In order to truly understand what that is, let me paint a picture for you. Let's say you, as the doctor, just got done with a routine appointment with one of your most loyal patients, Jack A. Smith. Of course, after the appointment, your front office will schedule a follow-up with Jack, make updates to his medical record, and begin the billing process. However, while accessing the hospital's electronic medical record system, or EMR, your employee accidentally enters the wrong middle initial. The result brings up the medical record for Jack B. Smith, a patient from a different department. The problem here is that your employee, although obviously authorized to view PHI, doesn't have internal approval to view Jack B. Smith's record. So is this a breach? Well, the access or use made by the employee in this example happened in good faith and within the scope of authority, which is the definition of the unintentional authorization exception. The second type of HIPAA violation exception is what's called an inadvertent disclosure. At your healthcare organization, you have safeguards in place as a way to combat oversharing PHI. These safeguards include asking your employees to talk about patients without using their names and set screensaver times when computers aren't in use. Even with those rules in place though, it's still possible that one of your employees sees PHI that they don't have permission to view. Like any business, you want your employees to build camaraderie together. After all, if your team builds strong, friendly relationships together, they're going to be happier when they come into work. One of the best ways to build a positive culture with your employees is to encourage them to take each other out to lunch. Of course, in order to go to lunch, they have to see if the other person has any interest in going. In other words, they'd have to walk to your office. Well, let's say now it's lunchtime and one of your coworkers is headed to your office. Once they're standing in your doorway, they knock and you turn your chair around to chat with them before heading out. The problem here is that once you turn your chair around, it exposes your computer's screen. Naturally, your new coworker catches a glimpse of what you have open on it because they're curious. And of course, it's the record of the patient that's coming in later that day. This employee isn't allowed to see this patient record though. Luckily, this isn't a breach and leads us into the second unintentional HIPAA violation exception. An inadvertent disclosure of PHI by a person who's authorized to access that sensitive information to another person authorized to access PHI at the same organization. The third and final HIPAA violation exception is called a good faith belief. If you're a healthcare entity, you probably still have and actively use a fax machine at your office. That might seem startling to you, but faxing in healthcare is still commonplace because it's an easy way to transfer patient information from one facility to another in a secure fashion. It also still requires the use of paper, which has some security shortcomings associated with though. So let's say you recommend to one of your clients that they visit a specialist. The specialist hasn't ever seen this individual before, so they need your organization to send them the client's medical records. As a result, the specialist requests one of your office members to fax over the patient record. A problem arises though when the specialist calls your office a couple of days later, still asking for you to fax over the information. There's only one thing that could have happened in this case. Your staff member sent the patient's PHI to the wrong fax number. Luckily, a few hours after talking to the specialist on the phone, one of your business associates calls your office stating that they received your fax, realized it wasn't for them, and shredded it immediately. What a relief. Crisis averted, right? Actually, yes. In this case, your organization avoided a breach. The third exception to an unintentional HIPAA violation applies when a covered entity or business associate has a good faith belief that the unauthorized individual to whom the impermissible disclosure happened would not have been able to retain the information. As I mentioned at the beginning, the majority of HIPAA violations are unintentional by nature. Although the regulation's breach notification rule defines exceptions, the unfortunate reality is that most mistakes that happen when mishandling PHI won't fall under these exceptions. As a healthcare professional, you can't count on your organization to function within the parameters of unintentional HIPAA violation exceptions. If you did, you're going to see breaches often and lose a lot of revenue due to the fines from the HHS. There's no one way to stop breaches from happening. You have to cover all of your bases and ensure that you're running a compliant working environment in all aspects of your organization. If you'd like to learn more about unintentional HIPAA violations and their exceptions, reach out to eTactics. And you already made this far into the video, so you might as well like it, share it, and comment below.